on. Oh, what'd you just do? There it goes. Okay. Hey, everybody, say hi.
Hi.
Okay, so we're still in the January-February edition, and we're still doing the Ten Commandments. We're on lesson 2, which starts on page 36. So just so you know where we are. So we're studying about, let's see, commandments 3 and 4. So everybody don't remember what 3 is? Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy, right? And 4 is honor your father and your mother. That's right. See, we were all good confirmation students. We still remember with a little help. Well, sometimes it's different in different versions, so you have to kind of be aware of, which version you're talking about. So let's start with the opening prayer. It's over on the left there. We give you thanks for bringing us together to study a portion of your word, O God. We ask you to deepen our understanding and heighten our awareness of your love and faithfulness. Guide us with your Holy Spirit. Amen. So see, there they are right there. Just in case. Usually the answer is on the page. So I'll start at the beginning here. Are the Ten Commandments still relevant? In March 2018, the magazine Christianity Today, and Jim takes subscriptions to that magazine, so if you ever want to read them, published a survey that found that more than half of Americans still found significance in God's laws. Can you guess which commandment was voted the least important? Of course, that's right, the Sabbath. Only 49% of respondents believe that honoring the Sabbath is still meaningful. The commandment to honor parents fared a little better, with 85% still considering this a worthwhile teaching. An ancient school of thought is that commandments are listed in descending order of importance. Therefore, commandment number 1, you shall have no other gods, is a key commandment, and the rest are interpretations of how to worship and honor God and God alone. However, this understanding would prioritize keeping the Sabbath and obeying parents over the commandments not to kill or lie. I'm guessing few people of any religion would agree with that today. Jesus himself clearly does privilege some commandments over others. It might seem as if the 2 commandments covered in this session were 2 of his least favorite. Didn't he get into trouble with the religious police for breaking the Sabbath? Yes. And as an adolescent, didn't he turn his back on his earthly parents when he overstayed the holiday visit in the temple? In light of Jesus' liberating teachings and example, do the 2 commandments regarding the Sabbath and parents still hold value for us today? So Exodus 20, I think is listed in the Ten Commandments. I think, is that right? 1 through 17.
That's what it is.
Okay, so as we're reading through it, you're supposed to consider the most important of the 10. Okay, so we're going to rank them. Which ones we think are the most important and which are the least important.
So just read it.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Then God spoke all these words, I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt where you were slaves. You must not have any other gods except me. You must not make for yourselves an idol that looks like anything in the sky above or on the earth below or in the water below the land. You must not worship or serve any idol, because I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God. If you hate me, I will punish your children and even your grandchildren and your great-grandchildren. But I show kindness to thousands who love me and obey my commands. You must not use the name of the Lord your God thoughtlessly. The Lord will punish anyone who misuses his name. Remember to keep the Sabbath holy. Work and get everything done during 6 days each week. But the 7th day is a day of rest to honor the Lord your God. On that day, no one may do any work, not you, your son or daughter, your male or female slaves, your animals, or the foreigners living in your cities. The reason is that in 6 days the Lord made everything, the sky, the earth, the sea, and everything in them. And on the 7th day he rested. So the Lord blessed the 7th day and made it holy. Honor your father and mother so that you will live a long time in the land and the Lord your God is going to give you. You must not murder anyone. You must not be guilty of adultery. You must not steal. You must not tell lies about your neighbor. You must not want to take your neighbor's house. You must not want his wife or his male or female slaves, or his ox or his donkey, or anything that belongs to your neighbor.
Okay. So, which one do you think is the most important? What do you think?
I said number one.
Number one.
Okay, all right. So, which one do you think is the least important?
Is there such a thing?
I don't think so.
I wouldn't think so. Yeah.
I don't think so either.
Sin is sin and,
Yes, yes it is. Yeah, I don't see any of them as being, maybe the name of the Lord your God name.
I put the covet one just because you're not really hurting anybody else. Are you?
Well, unless you are. Unless you are.
Yeah, unless you
Yeah.
know, yeah.
Yeah, but that goes back to you must not steal
Right.
and that,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
coveting is wanting it, but
Not necessarily
I
following.
mean,
that's
that's
why-
why, that's why, I mean, just out of the 10.
Yeah. If you have to choose. Yes. Okay, so, let's see, we're not gonna reread that, but Ecclesiastes, also, that's the one that, talks about, if everything there is a season, right?
Mhm.
Right, remember where Ecclesiastes is? It's
Proverbs,
backways, it's after the
Proverbs,
Psalms.
Ecclesiastes.
Yep, it's after Proverbs. So you're right.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we had to memorize our Bible verse by Bible.
Yeah, that's what it is. There is a time for everything else today.
yes.
Right here.
School. So what is it by?
Ecclesiastes 3 is right after Proverbs.
Psalm. Yeah,
Right,
Psalms
after
and then
Proverbs.
Proverbs. and
Psalms,
then
Proverbs,
Ecclesiastes.
Ecclesiastes. There you go. It's chapter 3, verses 1 to 14. Do you want to read that, Carla, since you're looking on it?
There is a time for everything and a season for every activity under heaven. A time to be born and a time to die. A time to plant and a time to uproot. A time to kill and a time to heal. A time to tear down and a time to build. A time to weep and a time to laugh. A time to mourn and a time to dance. A time to scatter stones and a time to gather them. A time to embrace and a time to refrain. A time to search and a time to give up. A time to keep and a time to throw away. A time to tear and a time to mend. Tear and a time to mend. A time to be silent and a time to speak. A time for war. Did I say? the first one?
Love.
A time to love and a time to hate. A time for war and a time for peace.
Through 14.
What does the worker gain from his toil? I have seen the burden God has laid on men. He has made everything beautiful in its time. He has also set eternity in the hearts of men, yet they cannot fathom what God has done from beginning to end. Know that there is nothing better for men than to be happy and to do good while they live, that everyone may eat and drink and find satisfaction in all his toil. This is the gift of God. Know that everything God does will endure forever. Nothing can be added to it and nothing taken from it. God does it so that men will revere him.
Jackie, we usually take turns reading. Did you want to read or do you want to just listen this time?
That's fine, doesn't matter.
Well, it's up to you if you want to read some or if you want to just take a pass. And Marcia will be happy to
Oh,
read if
okay.
you wanted to.
Okay, just read this.
Yeah, we'll just kind of
Or
read through
how
it,
much do you want?
however far you want to go.
Yeah, you stop when you want. This week's theme at our congregation's preschool was creation. Sitting on the chancel steps, with batch after batch of only slightly unruly little ones, I watched the story unfold. Using a godly play
You need to read that.
curriculum, our storyteller reveals 6 large panels with drawings of God's gifts of creation. light, water, earth, and sky, trees, birds, and fish, animals, and people. Then our storyteller paused dramatically. God had one more gift, she said, bringing out a surprise. An utterly blank seventh panel. A day of rest to consider and enjoy all the other beautiful gifts God had made. The children and I were in awe, 6 days of creation, and on the seventh day, God created something altogether different, a day of rest and gratitude. Children are lovers of order and rhyme. Good preschools generally have a carefully orchestrated time for everything. Arrival time, circle time, playground time, snack time, story time. Each time period, a precious container for stimulation and creativity. And then there's the blessed rest time, the time to play quietly or take a nap. In some ways, Sabbath is a time for the restoration of the child inside each of us. To take a whole day to notice what God has done for us. To take a break from ceaseless activity, responsibility, and manipulation of our environment. To observe and to wonder, to just breathe in God's goodness and be. I remember living in Jerusalem for a summer and finding out about the Jewish hotels' Sabbath elevators. 6 days a week they function as any other elevator, but on the Sabbath day they stop at every floor. No one should have to even push an elevator button on the seventh day, nor should you be in a hurry on the Sabbath. From one perspective, I found it absurd, but from another perspective, I found it delightful. Many of us have read the first part of the famous poem from Ecclesiastes. For everything there is a season and a time for every matter under heaven. Or we've hummed along to Turn, 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 the old bird song based on it. But we haven't realized there's a second part to the poem that describes how the rhymes and changes, that the sorrows and the pleasures of life are contained within God's grand symphony of eternity. We are invited to take time to stand or sit or kneel in awe.
Okay, so when was the last time you took a whole day rest?
Quite often.
In the last year,
Yeah.
Finally, huh?
Yeah, finally. Just sit and do nothing the whole day. Oh, good for you.
Yeah.
I'm guilty of not.
Most Sundays I try.
I say we need to do something that I don't.
Well,
think I
yeah,
will do.
I'm not mental.
No,
I do something I want to do.
Yeah. That's for us.
Okay.
My uncle, back in the 70s, and that when Kmart came to Dubuque,
Mm-hmm.
he was furious
Yep.
because they were open on Sunday.
Yes.
And you were not supposed to have to work on Sunday. And he wrote letter after letter after letter, which didn't do any good. Made him feel better that he was making his point, but he said never would he step foot in a store that was open on Sunday. I don't think he ever did.
She never wanted to
No
go out to eat on
gas or
Sunday
anything.
because somebody had to work. You
Right.
know.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's like today Abby had volleyball practice. Yeah, that should not be. You see it a lot in a lot of sports competitions
Oh, yeah.
are on
Oh,
Sunday.
yeah, anymore
Yeah.
there.
It's just constant, yeah.
Well, there are a few businesses that Hobby Lobby doesn't
Hobby
have.
Lobby
so-
doesn't.
And
And I don't
Fairway
think it
doesn't.
hurts their business at all.
No, I
mean,
don't think
you
so.
know,
Clearly, I don't think it does, because
No,
they
no.
don't
Yeah.
do it,
Yeah.
so. So it says, given the decline in weekly worship participation, how does or could your church community encourage worship and congregational fellowship as part of a positive pattern of rest and reconnection, new perspectives and gratitude? What do you think? And if there's fish in that time.
But think it used to be, you know, that was when families got together too.
Yeah.
You know,
Well, and then you always went to mom or
Grandma's.
dad or wherever
Yeah.
after
Sure.
church on Sunday. Everybody went to church and you
Yeah.
went to your grandma and grandpa's, or they came over to your house or whatever. I know my mom always put a roast in. And then she never cooked supper on Sunday nights.
Mhm.
Supper was on your own. You want to eat? There's food.
Yep.
Even when we were little, there's the kitchen.
We got, it was popcorn.
Yeah, it's always popcorn. He's always popcorn in our house. Every night, I still have popcorn every Sunday night. So yeah, I don't know. It's hard to fight the whole sports thing.
Yeah, it is.
Well, and my daughter, that's a teacher at Armstrong, we were talking about this just a couple nights ago, and that was, you know, the product that Abby had a volleyball practice for a tournament that's coming up. And, you know, they're just finishing with basketball. And then they, you know, you'd think that they had that volleyball last fall. But it's just constant, something all
Yeah.
the time, you know?
Yep.
Yeah.
Unless
But-
parents are willing to stand up and say,
Yeah.
I'm gonna do
Yeah.
that. We had a couple kids that had to make that choice this year for confirmation.
Yeah.
It's like, well, we have dance class. Well, sorry, confirmation is now. If
Yeah.
you wanna participate, this is when confirmation is.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
The dance class should
Yeah.
vary it for the kids, yes.
Well, I think they came to some kind of an agreement with
Mhm.
the
Well,
dance
it used to
teacher.
be, it was church.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was Thursday night when I was.
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
you know.
It was different communities. It could have
Oh, yeah.
different
Yeah.
communities, but yeah.
But I mean, it was, you know, that was
Sunday
nothing
night's the
more-
same way. We used to have ninth grade confirmation on Sunday nights.
Well, yeah,
But we had to
those-
move it
It was
because they have open gym. God forbid we would contend with open gym.
Remember when we had to memorize the whole
Oh,
catechism,
yeah.
the whole catechism, and then recite when they asked you a question and you could not miss the word, you
Yeah.
know? Yeah.
Yep.
My grandkids still have to do that.
Do they? A lot of them don't.
Well, our
For confirmation.
Cam still requires them to memorize, but he doesn't make them do,
No.
they have to do the Apostles' Creed and then the meanings. And they have to do the Ten Commandments, but they don't have to do the meanings. And they have to do the Lord's Prayer, but they don't have to do the extra stuff. And they have to be able to do the books of the Bible.
Mhm.
I think that's, is that it?
Yeah, they
Remember?
have
The
to.
catechism
all
was
it is.
that thick,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
and
That red one.
I don't remember it now.
Sunday
You remember
before
the
Now and
important
then.
confirmation.
And every now and then they
There's
quote the modern
stuff in
version
front
of
of the
this doesn't
congregation.
seem right.
Yeah.
Using the same
But
words
the-
as we learned.
The preacher does divide up the questions, you know, and he tells the students which question they have to do, but it's, Isaac was so glad it was COVID because he didn't have to do it in front of the
In front of, oh, they
congregation.
still do it in front of the
Oh, yeah,
congregation too.
yeah, the
That's
Sunday
very
before
silly.
confirmation.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Do
you
it in
didn't
front
get, you
of
didn't
them.
get confirmed if you did not, were not able to do it.
And I can remember them doing that when we were traveling in Germany. I can, the Sunday that we were at this teeny little church and it was called Dilkirchen, which is church on the hill. It was confirmation Sunday. I could just remember seeing the look of terror on those kids' faces.
Oh, yeah.
Standing up in front of those people in the congregation and they're just shooting questions at them one after another. It's like, holy. That's a lot.
Yeah.
But they must have done okay because they all got confirmed, so.
And, you know, the minister is up there and he,
Yeah.
you know, kind of help them out if they
Yeah,
can't
if they
think
got
of a
stuck
word or
and stuff,
whatever,
but
but,
yeah.
you know, they're still just.
Just the nerves will make
Oh,
you.
yeah.
Oh, yeah, no kidding,
Yeah.
no kidding.
Yes,
No
thanks.
kidding. Okay, so on the next page, we have Deuteronomy 5, which is the same, is also the Ten Commandments, and we compared these last time, I think. So, I don't know if we want to read these again, or we want to kind of read through them on our own and figure out.
Need to read the part that's different?
Sure, go for it, Marcia, go for it. You go for it, girl.
Verse 15.
12 to 15, it says, I think.
It's verse 15. You shall remember that you are a servant in the land of Egypt, and the Lord your God brought you out thence with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. Therefore the Lord your God commanded you to keep the Sabbath day.
so that's a little
That
different.
keep the seventh day holy, but that beginning part about remembering.
Yeah, remembering
Remembering.
why. Yeah, it's a different remembering
Yeah.
why.
Mhm.
Yes, yes. So,
being brought out of the
yeah,
land.
otherwise it's pretty much word
Almost
for word.
identical,
Yeah,
yeah.
almost word for word the same.
Yeah.
Which is kind of interesting. So they must have had them from similar texts, but a different writer, I'm guessing, that was more emphasizing the Exodus, you know, God providing in the land, from the land of Egypt and all that. So, all right, Alice, you want to do the next part, or is that okay? Sure. Or do you want to read something?
I will read.
Go for it. Go for it, Marcia.
Both versions of the third commandment make clear that the Sabbath is for everyone, not just a privileged few. Everyone gets a rest, not just the leisure class or the wealthy. Even enslaved people and work animals get a full 24-hour rest, not less than once every 7 days. It wasn't always this way for God's people. Back in Egypt, Pharaoh certainly didn't give them every seventh day off from their brick-making duties. The Sabbath is a mark of liberation, of the freedom for which God has delivered the Israelites. They are to partake of the goodness of life through regular rest and to always, always be mindful that all God's creatures deserve an equal, dignifying share of that rest. It's not a suggestion, it's a command. It's not onerous, it's the cleansing breath of life. I lived in Hong Kong for several years and got to know some of the hundreds of thousands of women who came from the Philippines and Indonesia to work as domestic helpers in Hong Kong households, many of them earning less than $600 a month. They were often expected to work from early morning to late night, tending children and the elderly, cleaning, grocery shopping, cooking, walking the dog, and cleaning some more. Since they almost always lived with their employers in tiny apartments, there was no getting away from their work, and many looked exhausted, with circles under their eyes. Sundays, however, were a different story. On Sundays, their one government-regulated day off, you could go to any of the large parks of Hong Kong and hear singing, laughter, and music. As you drew closer, you'd see the picnic spreads and sharing of food and witness clusters of robust, joyful Christian worshipers. Sunday was a liberation day. Luther's small catechism with African descent reflections notes, the Sabbath was the first fair labor law. The ELCA Asian Contextual Commentary also emphasizes the liberating aspect of the Sabbath. The observance of the Sabbath day as a day of rest is of utmost importance in Asian societies. The question is whether the poor people who are dependent on their daily work and wages and the laborers in industries and commerce get their deserved day of rest and find time to worship and praise God for all of God's gifts. The liberative aspect of Sabbath is not limited to human persons. It includes animals, nature, and all of creation. In this regard, the observance of Sabbath has ecological significance as well. More than resting, the observance of Sabbath is to redeem the groaning creation and keep the Mother Earth fertile for future generations.
So it says many expect to go shopping, get gas, visit restaurants, have their children play organized sports on any day of the week, including Sunday. How does this impact service workers and their families, society as a whole, faith communities? Just that they work. But you don't really think about it as people traveling more too. You know, the gas consumption and then the greenhouse gases and yeah, don't really think about that too much.
That might be one way of making mark with our nobody can travel on Sunday.
One day a week, wouldn't that be
That
sad?
would
That
be,
might make quite a difference.
Get your bicycle going.
Yeah, you can ride your bike, but
but you can't drive your car.
No, that would be, I wonder how much a difference that is.
Yeah, that's something to think about. The
Well,
whole world,
they
huh?
noticed quite a difference when COVID.
Yeah, oh,
started,
yeah.
you know, they shut everything down and people weren't traveling or going anywhere or doing stuff.
I just read an article not too long ago, and I tried to think of where it was and find it, but I couldn't find it, about this young man who was hired by a Jewish family to be their person to do whatever needed to be done on Sunday that they weren't supposed to be doing
On the Sabbath.
Or on the Sabbath day,
Their
yes,
Sabbath
their
is
Sabbath day was Saturday, right. And, anyway, he did it for years. Well, then something was said, and he said, oh, that was his grandfather. And they said, what? He was of Jewish descent. And here they were having him break the Sabbath law by having him work, and they apologized and that, and he said, he didn't know that when he took the job. But they felt horrible having hired him to do the work they weren't supposed to do.
But
That
they weren't supposed to have.
They weren't supposed to,
anybody
no.
working. That's the deal, you shouldn't have anybody working that day. I mean, it clearly says that. It's very, I mean, it's no
Yeah.
manservants, no maidservants, no animals, no nothing.
Mhm.
Yeah. But can you imagine? See, for me, that would just mean, okay, you'd have to work twice as hard the day before to make sure that everything got done.
And how many,
You're not supposed to cook, you're not supposed to clean, you're not supposed to
Christian Reform, a lot of them, they would cook it all on Saturday.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, all right, so have you ever looked into fair labor practices of businesses, manufacturers, well, we talked about that too. What might be some ecological benefits of Sabbath rest? We just talked about that too. Well, aren't we just zooming right along here? Okay, good for us. Well, let's see, we have a few verses from the Gospels, it looks like here. So we've got Luke 4:16, Mark 2, and Matthew 22. So, do you wanna do the first one, Mona?
Okay, so Luke 4.
And Alice, you wanna do the Mark one?
Mark one.
Are you good with the Mark one? Sure. I'll do the Matthew one, how about that?
4:16.
That what it is? 4:16?
Just that one.
Oh, I bet this is Jesus' encounter with the.
Jesus traveled to Nazareth where he had grown up. On the Sabbath day, he went to the synagogue as he always did and stood up to read.
Oh,
That's it.
so he was going to the Sabbath, he was going to church, okay? And then Mark 2,
On Sabbath day, one Sabbath day, as Jesus was walking through some fields of grain, his followers began to pick some grain to eat. The Pharisees said to Jesus, why are your followers doing that, what is not lawful on the Sabbath day? Jesus answered, have you never read that what David did when he and those with him were hungry and needed food? During the time of Abiathar, the high priest, David went into God's house and ate the holy bread, which is lawful only for priests to eat. And David also gave some of the bread to those who were with him. When Jesus said this to the Pharisees, the Sabbath was made to help people. They were not made to be ruled by the Sabbath day. So then the Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath day. Another time, when Jesus went into the synagogue, a man with a crippled hand was there. Some people watched Jesus closely to see if he would heal the man on the Sabbath day so they could accuse him. Jesus said to the man with the crippled hand, stand up here in the middle of everyone. Then Jesus asked the people, which is lawful on the Sabbath day, to do good or to do evil, to save a life or to kill? But they said nothing to answer him. Jesus was angry as he looked at the people, and he felt very sad because they were stubborn. Then he said to the man, hold out your hand. The man held out his hand, and it was healed. Then the Pharisees left and began making plans with the Herodians about a way to kill Jesus.
and the last one is Matthew 22. Hearing that Jesus had silenced the Sadducees and Pharisees, Hearing that Jesus had silenced the Sadducees, the Pharisees got together. One of them, an expert in the law, tested him with the question, teacher, which is the greatest commandment in the law? And Jesus replied, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it, love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and the prophets hang on these two commandments.
And that, imagine heaven,
Yes.
that is the key thing, that is what we will be judged on, is the love that we have for one another.
I would hope so.
Yeah.
I would hope so. Alice, you want to read
Okay.
that next part? Or?
There's an old saying, it's the exception that proves the rule. From reading Luke 4:16, we can see that Jesus honored the Sabbath. He made a weekly habit of gathering with others at the synagogue to read and study the Torah, Psalms, and prophets, worship, and give thanks to God. Jesus undoubtedly learned the practice of Sabbath from his Jewish parents to refrain from work, enjoy the company of the community, and take it easy once every 7 days. We might imagine the child Jesus jumping out of bed with joy on a Saturday morning in Nazareth, the Jewish Sabbath having begun at dusk the night before. No sounds of hammers or saws today. No need to help with chores since all essentials had been prepared the day before. If God the Father rested on the seventh day and marked it as special, why wouldn't God the Son? Yet according to all four Gospels, the young adult Jesus gets into hot water regarding the Sabbath. Excuse me. It seems the religious authorities had turned a gracious, spacious understanding of the Sabbath into a legalistic power struggle. Anyone who has worked in a bureaucracy or in the legal system can relate to the way in which a narrow interpretation of a rule becomes more important than either common sense or the call to make a compassionate exception. Jesus taught and lived out a clear interpretive hierarchy among the commandments by which all other rulers are to be judged. Love God and love your neighbor. As a teen, I worked as a grocery store cashier in Rockford, Illinois. The store was open from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. At 8:50, all the workers started eyeing the doors. At 9 p.m. sharp, our manager, Bruce, would lock the doors and we would breathe a collective sigh of relief. Quitting time. But every so often, a harried customer would come running up and frantically knock on the door. This might be an elderly man who had come back for just one forgotten item, or a mom who was desperate for a pack of diapers. Some of us, no need to mention names, would quietly mutter, "Hey, 9 o'clock is quitting time, Buster," when Bruce sometimes decided to let the person in to buy at one last necessity. "You gotta have a heart in this business," he would say. "Otherwise, it's the business that runs you."
Think of a time when you saw compassionate exceptions prove a rule.
Well, not too long ago on the news, they had a police officer that pulled over, well, he didn't pull over, he stopped in the line of traffic with his lights on because a little boy had fallen over with his bike. The policeman was white, the little boy was black, and it was in the South, and there were people who said that he should not have stopped traffic for that little boy, but out of safety, because somehow something was said, and the news caught hold of it, and of course ran with
Seems
it.
just common sense.
Yeah, of course,
Oh my
of
goodness.
course.
Oh
Yeah.
my goodness.
If you wouldn't have
But the
stopped, the
compassion-
little boy probably would have gotten out.
Or hurt.
Or, yeah,
Yeah.
Seriously hurt.
Yeah. but there were people who were so angry, and because they were stopped, they were on their way somewhere, and but
Yeah.
That's because there are many people that don't have compassion.
yes,
They're just so wrapped up in
Hurry.
yes, yeah, in a hurry, yeah.
yes, and my hurry is way more important than your life could possibly be.
Mhm.
I have to be somewhere way more, and it's more important than what you have to do. It's kind of like, really?
Mhm.
Okay. If it's that important, you just go right ahead.
Yeah.
Okay, so, talks a little bit about, I think this is Jesus' encounter where he stayed behind in the temple. I don't think we need to actually read it, but parenting is full of joys and sufferings. Perhaps one reason God commands us to honor our father and mother is because of their sacrifices and suffering. Both Joseph and Mary suffered the community-imposed shame of pre-wedding pregnancy. They suffered the trip to Bethlehem where Mary gave birth. Actually, birth giving always involves suffering. When Mary and Joseph bring baby Jesus to the temple for the first time, they experience the joy of receiving blessings from the old grandmother in the faith, Hannah, and grandfather in the faith, Simeon. But then Simeon makes the little aside comment to Mary, and the sword will pierce your own soul too. Roman Catholics consider Simeon's prophecy the first of the 7 sorrows of Mary. The flighting to Egypt, where Mary and Joseph went as refugees with Jesus because of Herod's vicious murder of Jewish babies, is the 2nd sorrow. The 3rd sorrow is a version of every parent's nightmare, the missing child. And yet, when Mary and Joseph finally find their 12-year-old son, after 3 full days of God alone knows how much anxiety, Jesus doesn't seem to fully appreciate his parents' concern. Only at the end of the story, as they return to Nazareth, does Luke's gospel take pains to reassure us that Jesus was obedient to them. It says, I always think that this encounter, and this is more of the same, reached a number among Mary's sorrows also, although Roman Catholic tradition does not include it. Jesus is starting to come into his own. He was baptized, he overcame temptation, he called his first disciples, he healed many, and he's been preaching and drawing massive crowds. And now, in his hometown, people think he's gone mad. His mother and his brothers come to restrain him, and Jesus uses it as an opportunity to redefine his fame. So, what ways did your parents suffer because of you?
Well, my mom was laid up 7 weeks after I was born.
Kim had a similar, his mom had like 6 surgeries after he was born.
I've heard that my whole life.
How much I suffered because of you?
And then we kind of silent, but you're worth it, you know.
Oh, yeah. It was all
But
worth it.
I really had 2 moms then, because there was a mom that lived with us. She was always my second mom.
Oh, okay, of course, made your family bigger. Any other suffering, were any of you like
Plus she had,
crazy kids?
plus she had a rare blood type, so
Oh,
she had a scheduled C-section, but I decided to come early.
wow.
So there was like,
I know how that goes.
like a waiting room full of people that could donate blood. And all of the troops.
Wow, wow, that's cool.
Yeah.
That's cool. Any others? I know my dad when I was in 1st or 2nd grade. I was born in Waterloo, so my dad used to work at RAS. And I just figured out that he probably worked at the same time that Larry was there. I didn't realize that when I was reading the obituary, but my dad had decided, he had started going back to school to get his degree in accounting. And he was going to UNI, wasn't UNI. He was doing night classes. And my mom's got 3 little kids at home. And he's working full-time days at RAS and working and going to night school. Well, then he got laid off at RAS, so he started picking up these odd jobs. He used to clean floors for businesses like overnight. There was a drugstore and there was a Ben Franklin's and I don't remember what else all the stores were. But he would do that. So then it started that he would be home during the day, he'd come sleep during the day, he'd go to class at night, and then he would work overnight cleaning floors. I can just remember he would, I hardly remember seeing him. You know, we lived in this tiny little house. And he was just determined that he was going to graduate so that he could get it. He was going to get an accounting job. He wanted to get into an office job at RAS. He was going to kill life. And then the last one started, then they actually went under. Yeah, well, he went in, he got his degree, and he went into the office. He says, I want to apply for an office job, and they said, well, we don't have any. So that's how he ended up in. He got a job at Dial Financial in Des Moines. Then for a year and a half, we had just bought a house. They just built the house in Cedar Falls, and so my dad went back and forth We drove down to Des Moines every Sunday night, came home Wednesday, left early Thursday morning to be back to work by 8, and then was home Friday nights, and then the whole pattern started again the next week. I don't know how many, oh gosh, probably a year he did that.
Wow.
We finally convinced my mother that we needed to move. She was, I'm not living in the city. It was like, I was like, oh, it was just, it was, I just can remember, I still think back, hours he worked. And when he was home, he would, they were still working on the house, cause they finished all the woodwork in the house, cause my dad loved working with his hands, and my mom did all the painting, It's just like, oh my gosh, I can just remember them working so hard on that house, and then we sold it. It's like, I wasn't what it was supposed to be. I just remember the traveling back and forth. Because he always used to talk about going to Marshalltown, and I thought, oh, that must be where Marshall Dillon lives. You know how you are when you're a kid? Because that was his favorite TV show, was Gunsmoke. We always watched Gunsmoke.
We still do every day.
Okay, I do from time to time as well. But it's just like, I used to think he was in Marshalltown. So the first time we went down with him, we went through Marshalltown, and I kept looking, and I didn't see Marshall Dillon. It didn't look anything like Dodge. Anything like Dodge City. Silly stories, everybody. Anyway, so how do these two stories of Jesus in the temple and the familial attempt to restrain Jesus help us to interpret and put limits on the fourth commandment? That's interesting. Put limits on the fourth commandment.
When your parents gave you curfews, and actually still do, but it's not like it was in the old days.
Oh yeah, you brought curfew when you were a kid. Oh.
I remember it was on New Year's Eve and the roads turned to ice.
Oh.
And we were with another couple. We had to go to Latimer first, from Hampton to Latimer, and then to Sheffield, so I was late. Herb stood at the front door with a gun. We didn't go together too long. Of course, he was joking, but making a point.
Okay. I guess it makes a statement, doesn't it?
No, we didn't have a phone to
You
call.
didn't have a phone with you.
I said, you should take me home first. Oh, it's closer to go to Latimer.
I never had a curfew, but I had to be up and do chores the next morning.
Yeah, if you had a problem getting out of bed. Yeah.
Nope,
We always
as long
saw
as we were up the next morning doing chores.
Always saw the last half of the movie, and then we saw the first half when Roger and I started dating. Because I had to go home at 11:30, and the movie didn't get over in time to get home at 11:30. So, and he couldn't leave earlier because he milked cows. So
That's the way it goes sometimes.
I had to be home by 10, so you know how much I went out.
No, I always told my kids when they got to high school, I always enforced bedtime pretty much, until they got to high school. And I can remember when Chris, his first year in ninth grade, he was doing marching band. So that was always, when they start doing their competitions, it's late on Saturday night. I mean, it's sometimes 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, depending on where they're going. And I always told him, I said, when you get to ninth grade, you're starting to grow up, so you need to start figuring out for yourself what your bedtime is. I said, I don't care how late you stay up, as long as you're not keeping everybody else up, and as long as your little butt gets out of bed every morning and you're bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and ready to go to school. Well, of course, what does he do the first night? He stays up till I don't even know if he even went to bed. I went downstairs at 7 o'clock, and they had early morning band rehearsal. He had to be there by 7:15. I went down and rousted him out of bed about quarter to 7, and he's like, "Oh, I'm so tired." I said, "I don't want to hear it. You have rehearsal at 7:15. Get up, let's get going." Boom, boom, no buts. Get your backside out of bed. And you know what? He did, and he got home, and I don't even remember him being up a whole lot sooner than after supper. But after that, he was almost always in bed by 9:30 to 11. He's like, yeah, mom's gonna make me go. So, all right, so let's see. I think we'll, if it's okay with you guys, I think we'll skip to the last part here. Is that okay? Honoring the ancient. Oh, did you want to
One
add
question,
something?
yeah, one
I'm sorry.
question I have. Okay, fourth commandment, honor your father and mother.
Right.
Okay. Jesus was honoring his true father,
Yes.
actually.
Yes.
So was he really breaking the fourth
No.
commandment?
No.
And what was it, how did he say that? Isn't that what he referred to when he said what he said?
So I'm with my father. I'm
Yeah.
with my father.
Yeah.
That's what he said. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, and I think she goes on to talk about that. Maybe I can't remember. Does she talk about that later?
There's somewhere, I read that somewhere.
Yeah, about sometimes where what our parents want us to do and what God wants us to do aren't necessarily the same things.
You are my mother and my brothers. Whoever does the will of God is my brother and sister and mother.
Yes. So sometimes that can be in conflict. So, yeah. Okay, so on the next part, I can't remember, I suppose we should read through these. Yeah.
Let's see, it's Matthew
Matthew
15.
15.
I got it.
And Carla is Matthew 19. And then Jackie, did you want to try?
Where are we?
We're on the next column on page 40.
Okay.
And First Timothy 5:8 is the other one. So
Which one did you want me to
you want
look
to
at?
look up First Timothy? Are you
Yeah.
okay with that? Can you find it? That's in the New
First
Testament.
And Timothy is after.
Romans and Corinthians. First, Second Corinthians, First, Second. This one is like First, Second Corinthians after that.
Okay, I will read Matthew 15, 1 through 7.
1 through 7, right?
And some Pharisees and teachers of the law came to Jesus from Jerusalem. They asked him, "Why don't your followers obey the unwritten laws which have been handed down to us? They don't wash their hands before they eat." Jesus answered, "And why do you refuse to obey God's commands so that you can follow your own teachings?" And God said, "Honor your father and your mother, and anyone who says cruel things to his father or mother must be put to death. But you say a person can tell his father or mother, 'I have something I could use to help you, but I have given it to God already.' You teach that person not to honor his father or his mother. You rejected what God said for the sake of your own rules. You are hypocrites." Isaiah was right when he said about you.
Okay, well, that's interesting. And then 19. He did have a way of twisting that on words
Yes.
against them, didn't he?
Now, a man came up to Jesus and asked, "Teacher, what good thing must I do to get eternal life? Why do you ask me about what is good?" Jesus replied, "There is only one who is good. If you want to enter life, obey the commandments." "Which ones?" the man inquired. Jesus replied, "Do not murder, do not commit adultery, do not steal, do not give false testimony, honor your father and mother, and love your neighbor as yourself."
Well, gee,
Yeah.
that's pretty easy.
Yeah.
Okay, and then First Timothy 5:8.
But if anyone does not provide for his own, and especially for those of his household, he has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever.
Ah, okay. All right, so let's see. Who's are you next, Judy?
Yeah, I can do
Okay, all
that.
right,
Okay.
go for it.
Jesus teaches that the fourth commandment is an ongoing and essential component of gospel life. He condemns the hypocritical Pharisees who think giving to religious causes somehow exempts them from supporting their own parents. A generation later, St. Paul writes to Timothy that whoever does not provide for family members has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. Strong words. Today, this commandment also calls us to honor and care for all the elderly in our community. In this regard, we can learn from the global church and diverse cultures. For example, Asian descent Lutherans have offered this interpretation of the fourth commandment. Virtues of respect for parents, including elders and ancestors, are prevalent in almost all Asian cultures. One can also positively imagine and claim the blessing of long life attached in honoring parents may be due to such practices. I can attest to the increasing honor I was shown as my hair turned gray during the years I lived in Hong Kong, which has one of the longest life expectancies in the world. Now that I am back in the U.S., I miss that gentle societal reverence for the elderly. I also never forget the year our congregation in Ames, Iowa hosted guests from the Evangelical Church in Tanzania. Paula, one of our church partners, marveled at the stately university buildings and the gleaming hospital. Then we took her to see a rather nice and pricey private nursing home. Paula was quiet. Then on the way back to the car, she spoke, "You mean people don't take care of their own mothers and fathers who gave them life? The elderly people have to live all together like this and have strangers cook for them? And where are their grandchildren? They don't see them all day long? Thank you for showing this to me," she said. "We do not have poverty like this in Tanzania." Now I will hasten to say that I thank God for good elder care facilities and nursing homes. I look back with gratitude on the attentive, skilled staff who cared for my mother in the last years of her life. Yet Paula's perspective as a woman of God from a different culture stays with me.
How does your congregation remember, honor, and care for active elders and more fragile and potentially isolated elderly?
I think we do pretty good, really. I mean,
I think we go out and visit them
visit them
and
and cards and
I
gifts,
send
gifts.
push books out a lot, of course, we get books and
Yeah.
something, and
The service, we get
services
the
and.
services.
We're,
Pastor gives them communion, doesn't he? Yeah,
Yep.
I mean,
Yeah.
you look at how things have changed. That is why people are not able to take care of the elderly at home because everybody has to work. Yeah, I mean, you know, compared to my
oh,
grandparents,
yeah, yeah,
I mean,
that's
they
true.
did back then.
Sure.
Yep. Yep. It's just part of your responsibility as a child is to care for your parents.
Mhm.
I'm struggling with that with my son right now. He can't seem to understand that I need to be close enough. And he wants me to move to Minnesota.
Oh,
It's like, you know, part of me wants to, because then I'd be closer to see the grandkids. But then I'd be
accessible to them.
I'd be 7 hours away from my mom.
Yeah.
You know, and if something happened, I couldn't get there. You know, it's like, I need to be able to be close enough that I can get there. But it's still almost, it's not quite 2 hours, but it's, you know,
Still, that's long enough to
yes,
try to get.
you know. I mean, I was closer before we came here, but
Where does she live?
Indianola,
Uh-huh.
so, but yeah. All right, let's go on. Carly, you want to read the next part?
don't, you want me to read Matthew or just read that?
No, I think
Okay.
we're okay.
Let's admit it. Throughout human history, there have been no perfect parents. Adam and Eve? Alas, no. Abraham and Sarah? Definitely not. How about Jacob, Leah, and Rebecca? Surely you jest. I once offered a program on mothers and fathers of the Bible. It turned out biblical parenthood is a thing, but not necessarily a good thing.
No kidding.
Not even Mary and Joseph were perfect. They were probably better than average, definitely better than my spouse and me, but perfect? No one is perfect except God. Does God really expect grown children to forgive and forget? Do not judge lest you be judged, Christ says. It is important to acknowledge the scars for what they are. All parents have faults, and some terrifyingly so. Evil exists. In William Faulkner's short story, Barn Burning, a young boy has a father who is a psychomaniac, or pyromaniac.
Pyromaniac, yep.
The dad routinely gets temporarily farming jobs, soon argues with the boss family, then burns down the building before escaping with his own little family in the night. The cycle repeats itself until one day it becomes too much for the youngest son, and he runs to warn the new boss of the impending fire. He has to disobey his pyromaniac father in order to obey God. He honors his father most in that moment by disobeying him. And then he further keeps the Heavenly Father's commandment by having compassion on his heavenly dad.
So think of times when it's been easy for you to honor your parents or elders in your life. Have there been times when this was difficult or nearly impossible? Resources to the scriptures and your faith or your church offer. I think it's always easy when you agree with parents.
I think it's hard when there's some dementia.
Yes.
you know,
Yes.
And you
Yeah.
know that's
Yes.
not your
It's not
parents.
them.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
or your aunts, uncles, you know, whatever.
Agreed. Agreed.
You know, 'cause I don't know if everybody's been through that, but, you know, but I have, and,
Oh, I think
you
everybody's
know,
been touched by dimensions.
I'm just,
Past it, you know.
that's not me, it's, you know,
It's, yeah.
it's,
Yes.
Another thing that I thought of as I was reading this part, one year I had a student who talked about jobs that we wanted to have when we grew up. And this girl said she wanted to have the job her mom had. And her mom was teaching her to do this. And it was to go into stores and shoplift. And the other kids turned and looked at her. They said, "That's not a job. That's my mom's job."
Oh, my word.
And here I am. Okay, do I say something? You know, she's not being harmed physically. However, mentally, that is,
Well,
she's
but the
something,
information she's
yeah.
gleaned.
Yes.
It's just-
Yes.
It's okay to steal from other people.
yes, yeah. And, I did tell. And the mom did get arrested eventually. And that because she was caught shoplifting. And that, I felt guilty, but I thought, golly, to be teaching there were two little girls. And mom would argue with a person in the store, so the people working would go to kind of diffuse the situation. And the girls then would take things, and that's how she taught them to get things. But it was like, oh my goodness. You know, they're doing what mom is saying, however.
Yeah, and they
it's
catch
breaking
the
all
little
kinds-
girls and they'll probably let them go. But if they catch the mom,
Yeah,
But eventually they will be caught.
yeah.
Mhm.
Oh my
Right.
goodness.
but it was one of those situations where you just shake your head and think, how long has this been going on?
Well, clearly it's
And
been
how
going
many-
on for a
yeah,
while.
Yeah.
If that's what they think her job is, it's
Yeah.
like, oh my goodness, oh my goodness.
yeah, and it just, that just,
In the
it's unbelievable
Yeah.
for us to.
Yeah. To think
Yeah.
that,
Yeah,
Yeah, I'd have got my backside whooped if I'd have caught stealing something. I can remember I'm sure I did at one time too, but I can remember my sister once taking some candy or something and my mom dragged her by the skin of her neck into the store and she made her apologize and then I can't remember. And then, of course the store clerk, sometimes they're so nice and they say things like, "Oh, it's not that big a deal." My mom's like, "It is a big deal." I can remember her saying that to the clerk. "This is a big deal." And she turned, she said, "Don't you ever do that again." So she did such the nicest voice, you know, it's like my mom was just, and the whole time then my mom just panned her little hide all the way out the door. And I was just like, oh, okay. And I can remember once Chris, when the kids were little, we were living in a townhouse in Kansas City and he was throwing rocks and I told him 3 different times, don't throw rocks because they're gonna break something. Well, what did he do? He broke the window to the basement part of the townhouse where we lived. And I said, "Okay, you're gonna have to pay for the window." And he looked at me, I think he was maybe 3 or 4 at the time. But he had been earning pennies for his chores. We had a chore list and he'd been saving up pennies. I said, "You're gonna have to pay for the window." So I took him in hand and I said, "And you're going to tell the lady at the office what you did and you're gonna tell her that you're gonna pay for it." I drug him in there and I stood him in front of her and I said, "You tell her what you did." I threw a rock and it broke the window. she did the same thing, that lady, she said, oh, it's okay, don't. I said, no, it's not okay.
Yeah.
And she looked at me, she's like, oh, it's not. I said, no, this is not okay, because he was told not to do it. I said, and he is going to pay for the window. And she goes, oh, no, no. I said, don't you dare. I said, even if it's only $1, he's going to pay for the window. And she goes, oh, yes, he will pay for the window, and it will be $1. Well, he had to save up, I don't know, it was like a month. And he was so proud that we went into her office, and the same lady was there, and he had his little jar of pennies, and he says, here's my $1. I can pay for the window now. And she just said, good job. What a good job you did. And I was like, yes. You know, it didn't have to be a whole lot, but I mean, he needed to learn that lesson. That was an important lesson for him to learn. You know, it's just, and I know some people are like, oh, no, no. Wrong is wrong. Sometimes they're extenuating circumstances, but wrong is wrong. Oh my goodness, yeah. Kids, you wanna just, kids, okay. Anyway, sorry, okay. I don't know about you guys.
Time to go.
Yeah, I do. I gotta run, I'm sorry, I apologize. Right, let's do our closing prayer.
Yeah.
Don't let me
That's the-
forget that.
Offering, right?
Oh, just whatever you wanna give. It's just whatever you wanna give. There's no set limit or whatever. So we're at the bottom there, Jackie. Thank you, O God, for loving us enough to rekindle us with your word.
Thank you for reviving in us a thirst for your Sabbath and a renewed hunger to honor parents, teachers, and the aged in our church and community. By your Holy Spirit, give us a sense of confidence and integrity as we go forth from this study, so we gladly and confidently love and serve you and our neighbor. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Enjoying the commandments.
Hi guys, we'll see ya.
Get it down.